What's up, man? How are you this week?
I am actually pretty good this week.
Yeah?
So, we've had a pretty quiet week and not a lot of new stuff going on, but Lubu's has started to get a lot more orders. So
Nice.
That's been going up, and we're about to go live with our shoe configurator, I guess, or customizer.
Yeah.
So we just had to tweak that a little bit more. And
Well, nice. It's been absolute chaos around here. This episode's probably coming out right during the height of tax season, so we're just ramping up right now in the office. It's a disaster. Everybody wants to meet and talk to me and bother me while giving me a bunch of work to do at the same time. So it's just chaos. So for the next several months, it's going to be chaos.
And I'm sure it didn't help, with me every other day saying, "Hey, what if we do this? How if we?"
You've been coming in hot with the new business ideas. Yeah.
What if we buy that office building? It's like I think my eyes are bigger than my bank account.
Yeah. Well, every time you come up with an idea, I have to justify it, and then one of these days we'll come up with something real good, though. So I think we're on the track with the last conversation.
We're working on something good here. So hopefully.
Yeah. I'm Scott Hess, tax and business consultant.
I'm John Barton, small business owner. Remember the tortoise and the hare? Slow and steady wins the race.
We started Turtlesmith to help people start small businesses, providing information and resources to small business owners and entrepreneurs.
Build a solid foundation and forge your dreams.
Well, this week we are talking about one of our final phases. I can't believe we've made it through the almost the entire list. That's been a lot of episodes. But this one is stay ahead of the curve, and it's one of the final steps in phase 3. A lot of businesses do not take the time or put in the energy to really paying attention to what changes are happening, not only in the economy, but in their specific industry, new technologies, things like that. It can really just kill a company if you're not paying attention.
Well, especially for a small business, you're just doing so many things just to keep up with the day-to-day tasks that are necessary. A lot of times you just can't find it in you to budget time to just sit down and kind of read what's going on with your industry, seeing what the trends are, seeing what's coming down the pipe, things like that. Because it's not only knowing these things, it's also taking the time and setting aside the budget to implement them.
Right, yeah. Budgeting and figuring out how to make the changes are a tough step for a lot of people. A lot of people do not like to make changes, especially if things are working.
Sure. I mean, once you've spent all the time getting it all down and where it's going. I mean, Chester's is a good example of that right now. Chester's is running. It's going to do what it does right now. We're making money, but we're not, getting rich off of it.
Yeah, the pool hall, right? Chester's
right,
pool hall and grill. Yep.
But we know that if we put in some extra effort, if we put in some of the equipment, that's new out there, people would like that. There are things that we could do with the food service, things like that. We could put in a better POS system, for example.
Yeah, that would sure make my life easier.
Yeah. So, I mean, these are all things that can be done where we can modernize a little bit more and keep up with the trends. But we're not doing it because I'm not taking the time to do it. The GM that's there right now is not taking the time to do it, and the employees aren't doing it, right? So these are the kind of things sometimes where you need someone that can take the lead in your company on those sort of things as well. It's not just knowing them; it's also doing them.
Yeah. You got to have somebody to kind of lead the charge in your business. If it's not the owner, then it needs to be a key employee or a manager or somebody. But really, it starts with the owner.
Some people criticize, Steve Jobs. They say, "Oh, he didn't create the iPhone. He didn't create the Mac."
I mean, it wouldn't be here without him.
And that's exactly what I say. I say, no, he didn't sit down and engineer the iPhone. By the time that he got around to that, being part of the company, the skills needed to do it were beyond his engineering skills. Now, he himself had a engineering background, but not known as the most skilled type of person, right? Steve Wozniak, however, is or was at that time, a really good state-of-the-art engineer who knew his shit.
Yeah.
But it can be really argued that without Steve Jobs getting out there and being the driving motivational force, that Apple would never have grown to the point that it did, and been able to be a leader on so many fronts.
Right.
Steve often had, it's often said that Steve Jobs had what was called a reality distortion field around him.
Yeah.
As he would walk into a room of engineers and he would say, "I want this," and they would look at him and they'd go, "That's not physically possible to do that, right?"
Mm-hmm.
And he would say, "Yes, it is. I know it is. You can do it. Do it. Show me next week." And somehow or other they would, because he would motivate people into doing things that they didn't think were possible.
Yeah, I mean, that's a great trait as a leader to have.
Yeah.
But he was probably a nightmare to work for.
Oh, he was. In a lot of ways he was. But he is an example of a leader who stayed ahead of the curve, so to speak,
Right.
So once he saw an idea that looked promising, then he would put all the resources on that he could bring to bear. And then that's an example of, not only knowing but doing and trying to be a leader in that space, once you learn about it.
Right. Right. Well, I think you hit the nail on the head earlier of small business owners having just so much on their plate already that adding this can be daunting, with everything else you're doing. So it is important to set aside some time, and we've got a few tips and tricks on the Turtlesmith website to kind of help you keep informed. But newsletters, networking groups, staying in contact with your peers and other people in the industry, staying in contact with your suppliers. They sometimes know things that you don't that are coming down the pipeline. Mm-hmm. It's just important as a small business owner to stay ahead of the curve. The title of the segment here. If you're not paying attention to these things, you're going to end up in a bad spot, and you may even get swallowed up and spit out. There's a lot of big companies who went bankrupt because they didn't pay attention to these things. Sears is one of them. Mm-hmm. Sears' very famous story of they had all the infrastructure and everything set up to be Amazon, and they just couldn't execute, or they didn't have the vision. Now, I think there was a bunch of other reasons why it didn't work out, but really in the 70s, they were giants, and then now they're bankrupt.
Well, they were the Amazon of the 1800s.
Yeah, couldn't you buy a house in full?
Of course, yeah, you could buy a whole house on Sears. There's a lot of I don't know how many of them are still standing today, but at one time in Oklahoma City, there were whole neighborhoods of Sears houses.
Right.
Yeah, you could. The thing was with the Sears Roebuck catalog, you could buy just about anything. I mean, and I don't know if you had that when you were kids, but we had it when we were kids. And that's how we did all of our Christmas and everything was out of the Sears catalog.
No, we didn't. I mean, we had catalogs. I remember as a kid getting catalogs for various stores, but I don't think Sears was as big when I was in the 90s. I don't know.
Yeah, well, the 70s, the Sears catalog was almost as big as the phone book.
Yeah.
And as kids, we would be looking through that catalog. I mean, that catalog would get worn out throughout the year.
Right.
And you might get like, I think, I can't really remember, but I want to say that maybe we got one or two new Sears catalogs each year.
Yeah, that sounds right.
And then, we would eagerly read that thing and go over it and we'd circle the bikes we wanted and the trains we wanted and the toy, whatever it was. You could get rifles, you could get BB guns. I think I got a BB gun one time out of the Sears catalog.
Nice.
So they were the Amazon of the time. So yeah, if they were positioned to end up, or to start what Amazon became, then yeah, they really dropped the ball on that one. And now look at them; they're just all their retail stores are going out of business.
Yeah. I think they filed Chapter 11 a few years ago.
Yeah.
They're bankrupt.
Are they completely gone now?
I don't know if they're completely gone. I think there's still a few stores hanging on. If I recall, last time I was in McPherson, which is where my grandparents are, there was still a Sears appliance store hanging on. But you don't see them at the malls anymore.
You know what's funny though? So this is what's interesting to me right now, right? Is like, why can't any other company also just become Amazon now if they've got the resource? They've got more resources to start up with than Bezos had when he started. So what is it about Amazon that they can't duplicate?
Well, I mean, I guess you could ask the same question in the 70s. Why couldn't somebody duplicate Sears? You know, it's just they've positioned themselves so well, and they're so huge, and the infrastructure is gigantic that it's just nearly impossible to replicate.
I would say, yeah, probably.
So you can replicate it on smaller scales, but to get to that scale is just it's ludicrous. You know, there's so many people who trust and like that product. And it was the same thing with Sears at the time. Everybody loved it. Nobody thought that they could ever figure out a way to compete with Sears. But really, it was the internet that kind of changed everything. The reason Amazon's so big now is because they started right at the beginning. You know, everybody called him crazy when he said he was going to sell books online. You know, that was a dumb idea at the time. But now it's a great idea. And I don't expect any of our small business owners out there who are listening to us to, well, maybe there's one out there who will be the next Bezos or Steve Jobs or whatever. These huge cultural shifts are hard to predict. You know, the internet, nobody saw that coming in the 70s and 80s and what it would become today.
You know what trips me out, though, is it's so hard for me to imagine that somebody looked at Bezos' idea, selling books on the internet, and said, this is not a good idea because of Sears Roebuck and other catalogs. Remember, so you may not have had this when you were a kid, but we had Columbia House records.
Right.
So it was like, you know, you could get like 11 CDs for a penny, you know, and then they're basically trying to get you into subscription, right? But the thing is we had mail order, right? You could get books and records and CDs and so on through mail order catalogs long before the internet.
Right.
So to me, when I look at that, and if Bezos had come, you know, if somebody had said to me, hey, we're going to sell books on the internet, I would have been like, yeah, that seems like a perfectly natural fit.
Maybe, but at the time, you know, Barnes & Noble and Borders were huge, and I think the argument would have been made of why would I order something on the internet that takes 2 weeks to get to me when I can just go to the bookstore and get it there?
Yeah, I don't know.
And
I don't know.
And see,
how...
now it's a flip because it's crazy. Why would I ever get out of my house and go to a car when I can just order something on
Right.
my phone?
I think that the thing that really made Amazon probably was the Prime, you know, where they said you pay us $100 a year and we'll make sure that everything gets to you within 2 days.
But that was way later. Amazon was already huge by the time they came out.
I don't know. I don't know how huge they were at that point, you know?
I remember Prime when I first got it was just in the last 10 years, and Amazon was already pretty massive at that time.
Yeah.
You know, and the reason that they could do Prime and have 2-day delivery is because of their gigantic infrastructure.
And that makes sense. So when I asked you about that earlier about why can't somebody do it, I mean, the fact that Amazon in Oklahoma City has not one but two or more giant warehouses.
Mm-hmm. And they also have lots of little small ones in like various towns and stuff.
Yeah.
So it's wild, their infrastructure.
At one time, Walmart was said to have the largest trucking fleet in America. They may still. I don't know.
It's possible. Amazon might outshine them, though. I don't know.
And I'm talking about big rigs. You know, like the largest fleet might be Amazon.
No.
But it just makes me wonder. You know that once these Fortune 500 companies started to see what Amazon was doing, I don't know why they didn't jump in right then, because obviously Walmart had the infrastructure. And it would be interesting to know, you know, like Walmart.com sells a lot, they deliver a lot, so I wonder how they stack up.
But you know, there's thousands of stories like that, you know, of people saying that's a terrible idea and then it's the best thing.
Yeah, and that is true.
Like somebody told Henry Ford that the motor vehicle was just a passing fad and it would never replace horses, you know. The Wright brothers who invented the plane said it'll never be good for commercial use, it's only for a fun novelty. You know,
they said that the Wright brothers themselves said that.
Yeah. I'm pretty sure it's a famous quote that because they never could imagine it carrying huge loads. You know, they were just skipping along tiny little bits at the time. You know, and so the technology and big changes like that are really hard for people to see.
You know, that is and that trips me out because as long as I can remember, anytime that anyone's ever told me an idea, I have, like, my mind just starts spinning out and starts thinking about all the tendrils and all the ways that it can go and the possibilities.
Mm-hmm.
Like that's just how maybe that's because when I was a kid I liked to read fantasy novels and stuff like that.
Well, you're just a kind of a dreamer, and those are the people who make great entrepreneurs. I'm the type of guy when I hear idea, I'm like, oh, okay, we'll see if it works, and then I do the math and make sure it works.
Right.
You spend a lot or come up with all these crazy ideas, and a lot of them are great. That's how we make great businesses is wild ideas come to reality.
Yeah, and you need the dreamers and you need the doers.
Yep, 100%. So the kind of theme of this segment that I want to put out there, or the turtle tip of this segment, is do not be afraid of changes that are coming through. Accept them, that they're coming, and figure out a way to adjust your business or to get ahead of it in some way so that your business is still successful regardless of the changes. So the big ones to look at, in my opinion, are technology, the industry, and like who the big players are and who's coming in to swallow you up. And then you got to kind of pay attention to the economy as a whole, particularly if your business is not recession proof. A lot of people who start businesses, they start luxury items and things like COVID. Those are the first ones to go out the door. Luxury items, not necessities. People don't have extra money they can't spend on fun stuff. So that's the kind of topic or the turtle tip of this segment is don't be afraid of the changes. Accept them and make adjustments.
Yeah. I mean, by the time this episode comes out, people will, hopefully it won't be that bad, but they'll probably be a lot of people in a lot of industries will probably be dealing with tariffs.
Maybe so. Yeah.
And, this would be the time right now. So as, we're probably not supposed to date these things, but we're recording this in December 2024. The new president has not taken office yet, but he's promised anywhere from 10% to 100% tariffs on everything. And
yeah, which I don't know how it's going to pan out for a lot of people.
Well, what's happening right now is a lot of companies are ramping up their imports right now, so they can basically warehouse a lot of stuff and kind of have a cushion.
Yeah, to see what's going to happen.
Yeah. And I imagine that there's a lot of companies that are looking at different ways to get around the tariff. So, if your goods are from China, maybe you're going to ship them to Vietnam or something, or somewhere, have a transitory country that you can basically eliminate the tariffs or reduce them completely.
Yep.
But that's kind of also, a form of staying ahead of the curve, right? You have to be aware of what things are happening on the regulatory space. You really need to look at what your competitors are doing. Are they opening warehouses here? Are they opening manufacturing here? That sort of thing.
Yeah, the regulatory one's a good one. I didn't even mention that. And it's funny because one of the reasons my cannabis processing company that we kind of started, they kicked us out of here just by rezoning our little area because they wanted more commercial retail space in it where we were. So, yeah, regulatory will bite you in the butt for sure.
And I just, I think I don't know how to feel about that necessarily because communities, small towns or cities, whatever, they have so much power with things like that where they can just you can spend your life savings setting up a business and they wipe it out just by a simple vote.
Yeah, they're brutal in that way. Yeah, or if they just don't like you, they'll figure out a way to get rid of you. So
it's funny because we just had that conversation with the when we're looking for a place to move the pool room to. And we found, one place with good visibility, everything we wanted, except one big anchor store in that whole like development right there has everyone tied up in a contract that says specifically no pool rooms.
We can call that one out specifically. I think the place we wanted to move to is the parcel next to it. The landlord owned both, but the parcel next to it they sold to a giant grocery chain, Winco. And Winco has in their contract that they are not allowed to lease specifically to a billiards room.
Isn't that crazy?
Yeah, and I'm sure there's nightclub, tattoo, dispensary, all that stuff. That is an extremely common thing for tenants to do, particularly anchor tenants. So like grocery stores or big box stores and stuff like that are considered like the anchors of shopping malls have a lot of bargaining power when they come up with their lease, and they're allowed to dictate what stores are and aren't allowed. Now, not specifically, but they can't say like, this individual person can't do it, but they say certain types of businesses because they want to keep their area classy.
No, I understand that. I just think that that type of power, should come with some sort of tempering. Like they should leave it open and say, so for the most part, we don't want billiard halls, but leave it open for discussion. Someone can come in and make a presentation and say, this is my place, this is a family place.
Yeah.
Because a lot of people are operating on reputations that were created by the Music Man or something, from 1940 or whatever.
Yeah.
They're operating on these ideas that a pool room is a shady place full of shady characters, and it hasn't been that way for 30 years.
Yeah, a lot of gambling and hustling and fights and nonsense.
It's not that way.
No.
I mean, even in the pool rooms, you will find people that are gambling or what we call matching up, but they do it in a competitive way. They're not really hustling each other. They're just basically like two sports figures who are sparring.
Does that go on? I mean, this is kind of off topic, but does that go on at all still at pool halls, like where the guy will pretend to be worse than he is while he ramps up the bet and then gets the guy at the end?
It happens, but it's pretty rare, actually. Yeah. There's a lot more people who are what I call hustler wannabes who try to do that sort of thing than there are people who actually do it. Mm-hmm. The people who actually do it that are really good at it, they never really reveal themselves.
Yeah.
So they slip in and out like a ghost wherever they want to go. And even the people who are knowledgeable about pool players are never quite sure how good that person is.
Yeah.
And that's one of the things. Like I've known a few true dyed-in-the-wool hustlers, who put their kids through college, bought a house, everything that you would think of as a normal American middle class life, and their basic career was literally going around the country hustling. They're road players. They have seasonal trips that they take.
They just hit.
They'll go down in wintertime. They'll go down to Florida and they'll fleece the snowbirds.
Yeah.
That go down there, and then they'll follow like natural disasters. Let's say there's a hurricane, right? And there's going to be a whole bunch of roofing jobs, right?
Oh, that's really interesting.
So
those guys have money and they're out there.
Right, they have money. They want to blow off steam, right? So these hustlers will follow that, and they'll hang around the pool rooms, and they'll just take their percentage of those paychecks.
That is interesting.
But they're kind of a dying breed, because a lot of people say like the internet ruined hustling. Right.
Well, yeah, because you can look up people.
You can look people up. You can take a picture of them. And you say, "Hey, who's this guy?" And then people from somewhere else will say, "Oh, that dude took off the pool room last week in Boise."
Yeah.
And he said his name was Rick, and then here he says his name is Steve.
Yeah.
That sort of thing. But again, that is pretty rare these days.
Well, that's a little off topic.
Yeah, you still do have a few of them though.
Yeah.
But the pool room, is not. I know it's off topic, but in one sense, that would be another form of staying ahead of the curve for a company like Winco. To not be rejectful of those things. Winco is open 24 hours, right?
I think so.
So pool rooms are generally like places that are going to be open till like 2 a.m. Sometimes they're open 24 hours, depending on the room. And there's been a lot of times when I have left the pool room at 2 a.m. and gone to Winco and done my week shopping.
Yeah.
So you would think that they would want to have it where, more people would be there during those night hours where they could spend their money at Winco rather than going somewhere else.
Yeah. Well, there you go. Any other thoughts on staying ahead of the curve? Our kind of.
Yeah.
I think this is almost our last segment. One more, maybe.
Yeah. Yeah, I don't know how many more segments we have on that, but so one of my I haven't actually had a lot of jobs after I started my first company working for other people.
Yeah.
But after I sold my first company, I took a 4-year break and I went to work for one of my former customers as a marketing product development, marketing. I guess just general thinker, I suppose.
That's what sent you to China eventually, isn't it?
Yeah, I ended up going to China to do that, to do product development and quality control.
Mm-hmm.
But when I left that position, my boss, who also was named Scott.
It's a solid name.
Solid name, that's right. And he's a solid guy. Both of y'all are solid guys, by the way.
Right on.
But one thing Scott said to me that stuck with me, right, was he said this. He said, he pretty much said, stay ahead of the curve by staying abreast of all the different materials that are out there, So
Mm-hmm.
the different things that you can use to make pool cue cases. Don't become complacent. Like just always be curious. And if you find anything that you might be able to incorporate that'll make your product better, try it, use it, get it, learn about it. And I've done that, So I ended up, using a lot of things that come from other industries in the cases, rather than depending on the existing suppliers who are supplying inferior materials for those parts that I'm now using stronger materials, and the competitors, they don't even know where I'm getting these things.
Yeah.
So even when they try to copy us and knock us off, what they end up using isn't nearly as good as what we have because they don't know exactly where we're getting it.
Because you keep making new ones and better ones and
better ones, but like one of my parts I get from a ship supply company, or a marine supply company. One of my parts I get from a company that supplies rubber mats for electrical rooms.
Oh, okay.
Some really heavy duty rubber.
You're getting stuff from everywhere.
Yeah, and it's just because I stayed curious, and as I'm just kind of exploring, I'm seeing materials and I'm seeing things, and I say to myself, I wonder if that could work. And then I'll take a little bit and I'll try it and try to incorporate it. And when I see that it works, I'll just start a relationship and start buying it in bulk.
That's a great point. I guess another way of saying stay ahead of the curve is just always be innovating, always be curious, always be looking at improving your product, and you'll naturally stay ahead of the curve almost.
You guys have heard me say this a lot throughout this podcast is having an attitude of continuous improvement, or a environment or a climate of continuous improvement,
mm-hmm.
where not only you but everybody that works for you is always looking out for how can we do this better, what can we do, right?
Yeah.
Right now Calvin is doing live editing as we're doing this, right? That's not how we started, but now he's figured out a better way to do this that makes his job easier, makes the content better.
Yeah, always
and
improving.
so on, right?
Mm-hmm.
And that's an example of that.
Yeah.
Right. So we'll be able to deliver a better product to people because he's always thinking. He could have just sat down and just kept on doing it the old way, but now we got a little bit better way to do it. And he's going to, he's the kind of person that's going to continuously improve his skills, which will end up making a better product here. And you do that. I know you do that with S&H.
I try. We try to do a little better every day if we can.
Well, I mean, you're very knowledgeable about a broad range of things that relate to business and accounting.
That's kind of the weird thing about being a bookkeeper and that's how I started out, as bookkeeping for just 100 different companies. Is you kind of learn little bits of knowledge about wide range of industries.
I can see that.
I'm an expert in how to lose money in a lot of different businesses. So now I'm just finally figuring out how to make money in a few of them. So.
You ever tell that joke that's what's the easiest way to make a small fortune?
Yeah, start with the big one.
There you go.
Yeah, I always joke with my brother because he's in the wine industry. I was like, how do you become how do you make $5 million in the wine industry? Start with 10.
That makes sense.
I think just eventually he's going to make us some money, but man, is it expensive to get going.
Do you have him on a 15-year plan?
I do. You know what? I do. I do. I'm the master of 15-year plans, I think. So, well, that's a great final point. The kind of always be improving and always be innovating. I think that just naturally keeps you ahead of the curve. If you don't become complacent and you're always trying to do a little better.
Now, I know you want that to be the final point.
No.
I'm going to say one more thing. there is a flip side to that, right? So you can be a little bit too enthusiastic sometimes. That doesn't mean you have to run out and buy every new thing or every new gadget that catches your eye.
Yeah.
Because I do have several machines that are basically still in plastic and not being utilized to their fullest.
Yeah, because you got excited.
Because I got excited. They actually do work for what I'd want to do, but guess what? I don't have the time to sit there and run them all day, and I don't have enough business to hire somebody to run them all day. So the machine is sitting there idle, and that's money that's been spent, that could be used for other things.
Yeah.
And in the meantime, the industry itself has advanced to the point where I can just create the designs and send them off to a printer who can send me back the designs, the same thing that I would print on my own. And I can just have, a library of designs that are sitting there ready to go whenever I want to print a shirt.
Yeah. I think that's a common error that a lot of small business owners are going to make no matter what. You're going to buy some stuff or lose a little money trying to innovate or trying to do something better, and it's not going to work. And I think it's just good to build that into your budget. Build the fuck ups into your budget. It's completely fine. You're not going to be perfect every time. I've made some mistakes. I've gotten software that I thought was going to make things much better, and it was a waste of $2,000 on a license. I just got rid of it right away.
I think my wife is getting tired of me telling her how this new machine is going to revolutionize how we do business.
Yeah, because you're on your 8th one.
Yeah.
Fair enough. Well,
but she always indulges me, and then she just puts her head down and sells more cases to make up for it.
Yeah. Yeah, you got a winner on that one. This podcast is brought to you by S&H Business Services. We are serving the OKC and greater Oklahoma area. We offer tax preparation, accounting, bookkeeping, and payroll services for small businesses and individuals. You can find us at shbusinessservices.com. Again, that's S&H Business Services, found at shbusinessservices.com.
So, I often feel alone in a room full of people. So,
that's a very deep sentiment.
Well, our next topic is networking, right? And networking in business is incredibly important.
Yes, I would say it's one of the foundations of being in business is you have to have a good, strong network.
And I, like to go to business get-togethers, conferences, that sort of thing, business parties, that sort of thing. But when I get there, I clam up,
Yeah.
Unless I've had some alcohol, then I can start kind of getting loose and getting into conversation sometimes.
Yeah. Not recommended for business meetings, but sometimes an effective tool for social anxiety. Well,
I think that, it does tend to loosen people up a little bit. But it's really weird, how so many people know me and I don't really know them. Like, I know them. I know their position. We're friends or acquaintances, but I don't ever really care to really get to know a lot about their families and things like that. And it's really weird. The reason I'm mentioning this is because the other day I was at the pool room, and there was a person there, and she was playing, and then she's a decent shot or a decent stroke. And I said to one of the other people at the pool room, I said, "Who's that?" Right? And then she came up to me later and she introduced herself and she says, "Hi, my name is, whatever. I don't even remember her name now, but she says my name was." Well, I don't, So, I'm just admitting it, right? Plus, as a happily married man who wishes to stay happily married, it is very important that I don't remember women's names.
All right, I gotcha.
Okay.
I gotcha. Excused.
Right. But anyway, what was funny was she introduced herself. She said, "I've ran a couple tournaments here." Right? In my pool room, she's ran tournaments, right? And I was like,
you owned it or before?
Yes.
Oh,
yes.
okay.
So apparently I think it was Don that set her up for that to do something.
Oh, yeah. Gotcha.
But I didn't recognize her, right? And one of my other friends, she was like, "I ran a couple tournaments here and everything." I was like, "Okay, cool." And my other friend, she looks at me and she goes, "Oh, that was so nonchalant and dismissive," right? She's saying to me, right? And I was like, "Well, I'm being honest. I didn't really remember. I don't know how else to put it." But that's like when it comes to networking, there are people that remember when I was going to sell the place like a year and a half ago, and we had that guy Bruce.
Mm-hmm.
So there's a guy right there that like knows everybody. He glad hands everybody.
Yep.
He knows everybody's name. He remembers details about them, and he uses that to his advantage to network and bring people in and get people involved in schemes and things like that. And get people invested in his dreams. And I think to myself all the time, I think, man, I have such a hard time asking people for things,
Yep.
That are in my network.
Yeah.
Now, there have been times, right, where I've said to myself, just pick up the damn phone and call the guy and ask him. Just ask him, say, where did you get that stuff? Who did you use for a supplier? Things like that, right?
Mm-hmm.
And 99% of the time, the people that you call up that in business, they're going to be pretty open with that stuff unless they've got, some business reason not to be, maybe an NDA or something like that.
Yeah.
But generally, they're willing to be helpful.
Yeah.
So
I think that was a theme that we talked about beforehand, is that you will be shocked at how helpful people will be if you just ask nicely. First,
Yeah.
People are more than willing to go out on a limb sometimes to help you out, or to give you a piece of advice, or even to actually help you along. You had a great story that you've told a couple times about that guy in Germany who just went over to the bank and made sure you got a line of credit.
Yeah,
There are
absolutely
tons of people who will go to bat for you just because they either believe in your product or they're just being nice. That's their nice deed for the day. But networking is incredibly hard for a lot of people. And do you consider yourself an extrovert or an introvert, or are you kind of a mix?
I would say I tend more towards being an introvert.
Yeah.
Except in certain situations where I kind of
blossom
or there's a certain switch that gets turned on where I want to say I turn into sort of a performer.
There you go.
And as a performer, then I'm talking to people, I'm giving my opinions,
Mm-hmm.
I'm being a little extra loud. Naturally, that helps a little bit when it's greased with alcohol a little bit, or
I get real loud
weed
after a
or
few
something.
shots,
yeah. And so I don't know that I think maybe that's some sort of compensatory extrovert behavior.
Mm-hmm.
But there's a lot of times when I'll walk into a room and I'll know a lot of the people in the room, but I'll just kind of hang back by myself, in the corner or something, and I'll just wait for people to kind of make their way to me before I start really engaging.
Mm-hmm.
And it's really weird how there's that kind of almost a bipolar feel to it, where sometimes I'll walk in and I'll be like, John's here, let's go, right? And sometimes I'll walk in and I'll be like, I hope nobody sees me.
I think that's way more common than you think. A lot of people kind of go through those ups and downs of being in the mood to handle that kind of stuff. I found networking to be literally the hardest kind of hurdle I had to get over to start my business. I had to get out there and meet people. The cold calls and cold emails, or really cold calls, are still, to this day, after 10 years in business, still tough to me. It's one of the hardest things that you do in business, is to just pick up a phone and make a sale to somebody who has no idea who you are. And so to kind of make that easier, you have to build out a network. And as a small business owner, no matter what you're doing, you're going to have some kind of network. You're going to need your banker, you're going to need your insurance guy, you're going to need your vendors, you're going to need a lawyer at some point, an accountant. Those are all people in your network who can help you with other things sometimes. My business helps connect people who are in a wide range of industries. So I just know a lot of people for having been in business for a while, but I just had to get out there and meet people. I had to go to those parties where I really wanted to sit back and do nothing, and I had to go talk to everybody. I had to meet, and had to give them a firm handshake, and look them in the eye and listen to whatever crap they were telling me that I don't remember, and I had to remember everybody's name, which is very difficult. It's just part of the small business owner playbook. You have to build a network.
I think it's important, I think, to train a little bit on that, to remember people's names. There's a lot of different techniques you can use, some mnemonics, some memory palace type stuff. You guys can look that up. I don't need to explain it, but
I just try to say, I found that if I say somebody's name a couple times in a row, then I'll always remember. That was my only trick. Like if I meet somebody, they'll tell me their name, and I'll be like, oh, so and so, nice to meet you. And then I'll try to say it one more time where it doesn't look like I'm a psycho in the conversation, and then I usually have it memorized.
Yeah, because I tell you what, one thing that happens to me all the time is forgetting people's names, name blindness, and it's that awkward thing where you're carrying on a conversation with them, and you don't want to let them know that you don't know their name.
Yeah. Yeah. One of the tricks that I've always found very effective is I try to introduce somebody that I do know to the person I don't know. So like if I didn't know Calvin, I'll be like, oh, hey, have you met John? And then I'll wait for him to tell you his name.
Yeah, I do that. I do that too, but sometimes I get the timing wrong, and then it becomes obvious.
Yeah.
Like Calvin will be waiting for me to say the word Calvin, and I'll be waiting for him to say it.
Yep. Yeah. It's tough. One of the best trainings that you can do, if you are a young person thinking about getting into business, the best training that you can do is take some kind of sales position. Even if it's a crappy telemarketer or a door-to-door sales is like, I don't know if they still do much of that anymore, but being in people's face that do not want you to be in their face and them telling you no 1,000 times and really going through that struggle, getting cussed out is really good training, especially if you're young. And it doesn't matter what business you want to go into. If you have that sales experience, it's going to translate somewhere.
Yeah, I don't disagree with that. When I was a kid, my mom used to drag us to the flea market all the time. So that I was one of those flea market kids that was up at 4 a.m. on Friday morning and Saturday morning, and going to the flea market, and so I had to deal with a lot of people just walking by and try to pump up the junk that we brought, and sometimes it was pretty cool. You'd buy something for $0.25 at an auction and sell it for $20, and you felt like the top of the world. And back then, of course, we had no internet, so I couldn't look stuff up and give them more information about it.
And so you're just making it up.
So you just had to kind of have the gift of gab on there, right? But I also found out that I wasn't that good at selling people things that I personally didn't believe in.
Yeah, that's it takes a real good salesman, a savvy one, to be able to sell something that they don't even like.
Yeah, and I think that's what happens though at a lot of places. Is people end up in these sales jobs, and they can be lucrative, but they know that they're feeding their customers a line of bullshit to make the sale. And I think there's a little bit of an emotional downside to that. You really have to be kind of a sociopath, to be able to do that with no feeling at all. And so that never appealed to me. So I've often said, I like building the cases. I don't like selling them.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Now,
if you go look at my YouTube, you'll see that I have, probably 100 videos or so on there where I am selling, but I'm not talking to one person. When I do a booth, I am not the one who generally approaches people when they come in my booth. I just kind of hang back and watch how they look at the cases, wait for them to ask me something.
Yeah.
Because I feel so uncomfortable.
Yeah.
But once the ice is broken and I start talking about the quality and start talking about what we do, then I feel like that my passion for the product and my honesty about it, comes through. And very often, I found that we will have people come back, or we'll have people, like I'll give somebody the whole pitch on a case of why it's great, why this, and I feel like it's coming across honestly, and that person will leave, and then that person will bring more people back in to hear the pitch.
Yeah.
They'll be like, so that's a form of networking as well, right? Because you're kind of passing on your passion to somebody else and creating a new node, if you will, in your network, that you hope that those people will then, become product evangelists for you.
Yeah. Well, that kind of sales pitch harkens back all the way to our very first step of phase 1, which is the elevator pitch. That's how you nail down networking, is you just refine that elevator pitch to your potential customers or to people that you want to work with in the industry, and you nail down that elevator pitch to get them in, and that's how you get people back.
And that's a very important point right there, because as I said, it's like a lot of times I'm a little bit shy, I'm a little bit introverted. I don't want to push people when they're looking at the cases. But I think that had I known about the elevator pitch and I'd have incorporated it and said, okay, I need something that's like a good 10-second opener or icebreaker that's not off-putting, because usually you go up and you're like, can I help you? Or, what are you looking for? Mm-hmm. That sort of thing. And oftentimes to me, that just feels kind of pushy and cheesy.
Yep. Yeah.
So if I'd have been thinking about it and I'd have known about the, like we've discussed in the steps, and you can use basically a form of the elevator pitch as your opener when you want to start talking to somebody about what you have to sell.
Yep.
And you can do the same thing when you go to parties and things like that in the industry. Just have some lines ready that are interesting and intriguing, without being cheesy or cringe. And I think that would work, but that takes a little bit of work.
Well, it's that same cringy statement that, of just, or cold open of, hey, can I help you? Or how are you doing? Or whatever, that's no good. They've heard 100 times that day if they're in a big show or if they're out shopping. So it's good to have something different. And you got to have multiple of them, because you can't say one elevator pitch to somebody and then turn around and say the exact same thing. You got to have a couple different variations. So
one that I did do, that I would try once in a while was like I would go up to somebody and I would say, I had two variations of it. One was how much do you love your cues? Your pool cues, right?
Yeah.
And the other one was how much do you hate your cues? Mm-hmm. Now, the hate your cues one came with a little bit of a kind of a negative reverse psychology thing, because if they came in with like a case that I knew was like super shitty and their cues were rattling in it and everything, then I might say to them, how much do you hate your cues? And they'd be like, what? What are you talking about? And then I say, can I grab your case? Right? And they'd give it to me and I'd go shake it like a canasta, right? And they'd hear it rattling in there. And I'd go, do you think that is good for your cues? And they might say something like, well, I don't necessarily think it's bad for my cues, right? And then that would be my opener where I could open it up and I could say, and talk about how cues are constructed and things like that, right?
Yeah.
But it had the potential to backfire, because when you say that to someone who's got a case on their shoulder, you're kind of attacking their judgment, because they've already paid for the product that you're criticizing. So that one's not one that I did often, So, but sometimes it worked and sometimes it didn't.
High risk, high reward on that one.
Yeah. But basically, this is turning into more like a sales pitch guide rather than a networking thing. But it still applies on the networking scale, because it's super important, to get to know who's around you. Mm-hmm. You want to know a couple things. You want to know and really be interested in what people do. Like what do they do? What do they represent? How honest are they? Because a lot of times the thing with a network is it's not even necessarily that there's someone that can help you, but they might be able to help someone that needs help that's also in your network. Mm-hmm. So just being a matchmaker and putting those people together. But then the problem is if the person that you're essentially vouching for is a screw up, then that kind of reflects back on you and your judgment sometimes.
Sometimes you have to take a risk on that. I've met a few people. I've introduced them to other people, and it's not gone well, and it's backfired a little. But I kind of think of networking just in general. It's a little bit like dating. You've got to really just got to put yourself out there. You got to get in front of people, talk to different people, kind of form those relationships and do your best to, not only find people that are useful to you, but also find people that you can be useful to.
Exactly.
If you are useful to somebody else, then you become a part of their network, and then by extension, their network becomes a part of yours. So this podcast is brought to you by S&H Business Services. We are serving the OKC and greater Oklahoma area. We offer tax preparation, accounting, bookkeeping, and payroll services for small businesses and individuals. You can find us at shbusinessservices.com. Again, that's S&H Business Services, found at shbusinessservices.com. So you hinted at it, living on the edge, companies at the brink of disaster. We're going to tell some stories, I think, about our living on the edge. So what was your worst time living on the edge?
There have been several worse times, actually, but
we got what's the worst one?
Okay, I'll tell you. I think this one's not so much financial as it is fearful.
Yeah.
So when I first got into doing this, right, I was making cases I started out in my attic. We had a little one-room studio apartment, and we had access at it. We were in a 6-story walk-up, and we had attic access, and we had a basement storage room that everybody in the apartment had their own little storage room that they had down in the basement.
Yeah.
And it was freezing in both places.
Yep.
So I started out in the attic. I borrowed a sewing machine. And I thought, I'll make a little space up here and make cases. We're at the very top, so I wasn't bothering anybody else from noise or anything. And that lasted about a week or so because it was just miserable up there.
Yeah.
So then I decided I would use our storage room down in the basement, right? So I did that. And one of my early clients was a guy that had a nice shiny Mercedes, and I built him a case, and then when he came to pick up the case, we had a nice conversation. And he says to me, have you ever thought about, taking on a partner? And I was really just brand new to this, maybe like 3 or 4 months into it at that point, right? So he said he just sold his construction company. This is a story I got. And he was looking for something to invest in that was less strenuous than construction, right?
Okay.
So his pitch was, you build the cases, and I'll do the business part of it since I already know business. I'll handle sales and everything else, right? So we get together, right? We rent an office. He rents the office, or he had an office. I'm not sure, but he had a space, right? So we move into that space, and at one point, I go on vacation I'm just working making cases, right? So I'm trying to build up inventory, and these are one at a time. I've got one helper, and we're just trying to build up inventory to go to tournaments and shows and sell the cases. And so at one point, I get to a point where I've got about 17 cases made, right? And I go on a vacation with my girlfriend, right? We go to Italy for like a week. Come back, and these cases are gone. And I was like, where's the cases? Well, come to find out, he traded the cases for a pool cue. He just took all those cases that I built, right, and traded them for a pool cue.
Okay.
And I was like, what? Why would you do that, right?
Yeah.
So that was the beginning of the end with this, right? Well, come to find out, this guy didn't have a construction company. He was literally a thug who extorted people for money and smuggled drugs. And you know what should have been the clue for me? This is how naive I was. The case that he ordered when he was just a customer and not a partner, he said to me, I need this case to, be able to put in, like, say, a kilo of sugar. That is not an exaggeration, people.
How old were you at this time?
I was like 22, 23.
Still a little green and naive.
Yeah, very green.
Yeah.
And I actually built him a case that was longer than normal, right? And it had like a hidden pouch in it where you could put I literally built it for a kilo of sugar. And if you opened up the bottom pocket, you wouldn't be able to tell that there was anything under the bottom of the pocket.
Yeah.
An X-ray, I'm sure, would have revealed it, but But just looking at it casually, you wouldn't know.
So you're admitting to being an accessory to smuggling.
No, I'm not. I'm admitting to building a case with a secret compartment. That's right. It's not my job to know what was in that compartment.
Yeah.
Now, as far as him being allegedly a drug smuggler, that's what the police said.
Oh, okay.
But I didn't know that at the time, right?
Yeah.
So anyway, after this whole 17 case thing goes down, right, where he basically gives away, at that time I was selling cases for $400 or $500. So you're talking about like almost $10,000 worth of cases retail that this guy traded for a pool cue that wasn't worth, $2,000.
Yeah.
And so obviously you could see the relationship dynamic there was that he didn't, treat me as a full partner or care about, what was going on. Come to find out, he also wasn't doing the business side of it. He wasn't paying the bills. We would order leather, and then people would call up and say, hey, the invoice is due. And he would literally try to turn on some kind of fake accent, like a foreign accent, and say, oh, sorry, don't understand, sorry, or whatever. I'm not going to try to do an accent, but you understand what I'm saying, is to try to not pretend like he's not the person that they were trying to get a hold of.
Wow. That's quite a dramatic story.
Now, keep in mind, right, that I'm not, and you know this because you know me now well enough to know that I don't pay attention to the numbers. I don't do the things that are supposed to be done, and I pay the penalty for it. Well, the penalty I paid for that back then was getting into business with a guy that had a background as a serious offender, right, and a extortionist, who literally, like in the movies, would beat people up for money.
That's crazy.
And how I know this is because at some point the police show up at my doorstep after this whole 17 case, after, I'm already pissed off at them for this. They show up and they say, you're associated with this guy. I'm not even going to mention his name. Even now, that's how afraid of him I am. But they show up and they say, how do you know him? Right? And so I explain, hey, he's my partner, he's a construction company, the whole deal. Well, sorry to tell you, but he's never had a construction company, and we'd like you to wear a wire. Like literally, like out of the movies, right? And I was like, I'm not doing that. And I said, I'm sorry, I'm not doing that. I was so scared out of my mind, right? And so, I worked up the courage basically to, several days after that, I worked up the courage to say to him, I said, hey, I don't really think this is working with the partnership. I'd kind of like to just go my own way and do my own thing. And I kid you not, he does this. He opens up the drawer and he pulls out a gun and he just kind of sets it on the counter like that. And he just looks at me and he goes, well, I don't know why you feel that way, but I have to tell you that I've grown very fond of our partnership. And I would be extremely upset, if we didn't continue. Just like that, right? And I was like, okay. And I left, right? So I started making plans for kind of withdrawing in the middle of the night and leaving, running away. And that's what we did. I had a friend of mine help me, and I owned the pool table. So we literally, in 15 minutes, we broke a pool table down and put it in the trailer. And I got out everything that was mine and left, right?
Yeah.
Well, when we got to the city that I was moving to, I literally, like a thief in the night, man. I was like, got my shit and I was gone. I didn't care about partnerships, paperwork, contracts, whatever. So he tells the police that he had $1,500 or something, inside the pool table, whatever, right? And so they come and they talk to me, right? They question me when I'm in the next city. And I was like, there was no money in there. I said, this is my pool table, it's my property, my stuff. There was nothing in there. So the police in that city, they start investigating a little bit further. And they told me about his record that the police in the other city, the ones that wanted me to wear a wire, that they didn't tell me. Turns out it was longer and much more dangerous than they had let on. Like this guy was a serious criminal. So that was my worst story about living on the edge right there. So for several months, there was a police car parked out in the parking lot below my apartment, just watching out for him. And the police detective that was handling the case told me that this is what he said to me. Now, I don't know if this ever actually happened, but he said to me that they had arranged for that guy to be informed that if anything happened to me, they were going to personally hold him responsible.
Oh.
So basically dig into
Saved
it
your
more.
bacon. Yeah.
I mean, maybe, maybe they did. Now, here's a twist to this story, right? The guy created a case company, a case brand, and knocked off, the cases, the main design that we were making. He knocked it off. He went to, I believe it was Pakistan, and had the cases made. And the name of his company was Revenge. So for a couple of years, I had to deal with that. Was this dude out there selling cases that looked like mine with the brand, the literal tag on it was Revenge.
Good Lord. Well, that's living on the edge for sure.
So how was that? How was that for a living on the edge story?
That's a good one, man. That's a good one. Well, I think that's it then, isn't it?
Don't you have one? I think you.
I
don't
know if I can top that story.
It's not about topping it. You had one where you went broke and.
Okay. Yeah. 2019, my business was finally doing very well. I hired Tiffany to come work for me. She's a tax attorney, so we were going to expand our business to do clients who had severe tax debt. We were going to get them out of trouble. And we still do that today, which is a good portion of our business, helping people out of tax trouble. But 2019, I was finally making enough money to hire somebody and to move offices. So we actually moved into this building, the one that we have now. And I had a little extra money that I invested. I may have overextended myself slightly, but I invested in a couple other businesses that I thought were going to do very well. And 2020 was going to be my year, man. I was rolling my bones. I was going to make all the money and be very successful. And then COVID hit, and I lost half my clients. Both the businesses I invested in went kaput because nobody was starting or buying new things during COVID. And so I lost almost everything in 2020. A lot of my clients, a lot of money from these business ventures. And one of my partners in one of my ventures passed away in 2020. So just kind of all the bad luck. And in December of 2020, I had $6,000 to my name. And in January 1st, I owed $20,000 in bills and payroll and rent and health insurance and all that stuff. So I was right on the edge. There was nothing. So fortunately, during Christmas, I took a loan from my brother who saved me. And then we had to completely retool our company. He bought me 2 months of float, and I retooled my entire company to do different forms of accounting to increase our bookkeeping and our payroll service. And then we started advertising for the cannabis industry. And that's what really saved me in 21.
That is great to hear, but I can totally sympathize with that because I've had a lot of situations throughout the years where we've been in similar situations. My mother-in-law, one of her schoolmates has a factory that makes styrofoam containers, or they make the molds for the styrofoam containers, and then they have another division that actually makes the styrofoam containers. So they do both, right? They make molds for other companies and themselves. And that guy has a byproduct of that is he has really good laminated wood, that's really, really tough, right? Because it's used for the metal pieces to make the stamps, to cut out the styrofoam. So we ended up, buying the wood that he would normally throw away. We ended up buying it from him, and there were several times, right, where we were in that financial position, where we couldn't make payroll, and we ended up, we arrived in America with approximately $150,000 in debt that was primarily from borrowing from him to keep going.
Yeah.
And the promise of being in America that I told my wife was, I said, we are going to be in the same time zone as the primary where the primary bulk of our customers are in America, right? And if we're in China, it's hard for them to contact us because we're, 12 hours difference.
Right.
So I said, if we go to America, then we can sell and operate from America. And she agreed, because she's optimistic, and believes in a dreamer. But when we got here, I didn't have any credit cards. I had no credit, right? We had like less than $1,000 in the bank. I was literally living in my parents' house, and I didn't even have a car, right? I was borrowing like one of my dad's cars. And we had 2 toddlers, when we came over. So we bought a bunk bed, so we had a bunk bed in the room. It was all 4 of us. At one point, we had $1,200 in the bank. I'm sorry, we had $1,500 in the bank, and I spent $1,200 on it on a trailer, right?
Yeah.
So we could go to shows. And I just told her, I said, if we can just get out there and sell cases, if we can just keep turning cases, and we'll make it. But that debt was hanging over our head. It's my mother-in-law's friend. It's private debt, and I don't even know if we paid interest on it. So
that's a tough kind of debt, though, to have.
But it was private debt, and we're really just trying to make it. And every week it was something, right? Are we going to be able to make payroll? Is it did the cases not get here quick enough? Is there things wrong with them? We did one thing with another factory. We brought a whole container of cases. It was like $30,000 worth of cases that I got him to give me on consignment. So I didn't have to pay for them all up front, but they were bad. So now I had to go get these cases out of custom. Now I got to stock the booth with them, and they're not good.
Yeah.
But I still got to try to sell them,
Yeah.
and then just face the consequences later. And it turned out they were even worse than I thought. And over the years, I ended up eating all those cases. Basically when they'd come in, and I'd just give them one of ours instead.
Yeah.
And that cost us a lot of money. But those were the risks, and those are the trials that you have to go through sometimes.
Well, that's the struggle.
That's the struggle. It really is.
But I think the struggle is what makes people interesting. If everything was easy, you'd be a boring person.
Yeah, I can agree with that.
Tough times gives you personality and character.
Yeah, and it works you out. It really does work you out. But I will say this, and I'm going to harp on this so much throughout our conversations, is there's a lot of these stories where people jump in and seat of your pants, and it's borrow money from wherever you can. And you hear about the most of the time you hear about from the successful people, how they had to go through that when they were starting out and everything. You don't hear a lot of stories about the people who didn't make it. But I will say this, that in my opinion, the biggest difference is a lack of planning, because even if I go out and borrow money from my mother-in-law's friend or wherever I can, to keep going, not having a plan of how best to use that money is a sure way to waste a lot of it.
Yep.
So the purpose of us doing this here at Turtlesmith is literally to save you from the type of mistakes that create the stories that we're telling you.
Yeah. Make a plan, and you'll avoid them.
Like let's just, like your situation where you lost all your clients, you lost half your clients and everything. That's something you couldn't do anything about. COVID, comes in. That's a worldwide thing, and it takes so many people down. Some people thrived during COVID.
Some people did well.
Some people thrived, and some people lost businesses that they'd been doing for 20 years.
Yeah.
But that's something that just it's a blanket that descends on society, and some people it smothers, and some people it warms. So you can't do anything about that. You just have to roll with it, whatever happens, and make your way the best you can, right? But then there's other situations, right, where the wounds are self-inflicted. And that's what we are trying to help you avoid, is the self-inflicted ones. And I can tell you tons of stories where the wounds are self-inflicted. don't vet your prospective partner well enough,
Yeah.
Don't just blindly trust people who show interest in you. So there's one right there. I mean, that could have turned out a lot worse.
It could have turned out a lot worse. That was a very interesting story.
Like, you want to know how scared I was? For real? This is how scared I was, Scott. I'm over in the U.S., right? I came to the U.S. to sell cases. We were at one point, this is a whole other story, right? But we got to one point where a big client just dicked us around and decided to withhold their order for 4 months, and then finally just tell us they weren't going to order from us because they were ticked off because we were, coming over and selling in America, which wasn't a stipulation in the first place that we couldn't do that. They were just, they read a situation wrong and then decided to screw with us, rather than just being upfront and us working it out, right? So I ended up having to come to the United States. We were, for all intents and purposes, pretty close to bankrupt. This is my first company, right? And so we bought a van on a credit card. I got it,
Not advisable.
Not advisable, but that's what I had, right? So I started just driving around the United States. So at one point, I was going to go to a tournament, and somehow or other, I heard that the guy was going to be there, right? Fuck it, I can probably say his name now. It doesn't matter. But
I would not.
But are we still recording? Okay. But I was so scared just at the thought that he might be in the same space as me that I borrowed one of my dad's guns. And I'm not a gun person, right? So I didn't even know how to rack it, Like, you'd think I would practice with it or something if I was going to carry it around. But I put it in the glove box of the car, right, of the van. And on the day that I was driving to the tournament, right, I'm on the kind of the back road highway in Florida, and I'm drafting behind another car. She's going like 75, 80 miles an hour, and I'm like, cool, run point, right? Get me to the tournament faster. Well, this highway patrol officer, pulls us both over.
Yeah.
He pulls 2 cars over at once.
That'll happen.
Right? And I was like, shit. So the registration and everything is in the glove box, right? And he walks over to that side. Now I got to get inside and get the registration and everything out, without him seeing the gun, because it's not registered to me. I don't know what the laws are in Florida. I don't want to get shot.
I feel like you're admitting to some crimes in this episode.
Maybe, but statute of limitations definitely has run out on that.
All right, fair enough.
So I mean, if we get the Florida Sheriff's Association reading this, and Sheriff Grady wants to come after me and try to get me extradited from Oklahoma for a gun when both states are, I think, constitutional carry at this point,
yeah,
I think I'm okay.
I think so too,
But anyway, this is just an example of how scared I was, right? Because I'm carrying a gun that I don't even know how to use because I'm afraid of a guy that I didn't bother to vet well enough to know not to take on this guy as my partner, and now I'm in a whole other country being afraid of him.
Yeah.
So
tough one.
So we're trying to save you guys from that sort of stuff by teaching you how to properly prepare and plan. And hopefully, your living on the edge stories will never be as precarious as some of the ones that we've gone through.
Yeah, hopefully they'll pale in comparison.
Yeah.
Well, all right, man. Any final thoughts for this week?
Nope.
Well, it's always a pleasure talking with you, man. We'll see you
too,
next
man.
week.
You too.